Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Inside the Pickle Jar. And I think I have a pretty interesting episode for today. It's something that I know a lot of my neurodivergent clients, myself, and many other people that I know are on the spectrum or have ADHD. But this whole idea around executive function, procrastination, and am I just being lazy? And I want to kind of debunk some of the guilt and shame around procrastination, because it's more than just laziness. It isn't laziness at all. And I hope by the time I finish with this episode that you will be less, be not as hard on yourself, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I have a few notes. I have a lot on my phone here. I have some on my computer. And I want to sort of round out the episode with a bunch of true neuroscience around procrastination and how you can motivate yourself if there's something that you're really trying to do. Even if you're neurotypical, I think you'll find this episode really helpful, especially if you tend to procrastinate or put things off, or maybe you have really big goals that you're trying to achieve, but keep putting off those little first steps that you're trying to accomplish in order to get a little bit closer to finalizing. So I just want to be clear, procrastination isn't a time management problem, it's an emotional regulation problem. And it's really rooted in how the brain handles stress, reward, and threat. And so the neuroscience shows that procrastination happens when the brain's emotional centers overpower its planning centers, which causes us to avoid tasks that feel overwhelming, uncertain, or identity threatening. And so I'm going to dive really deep into what are those emotional centers and the planning centers. And I've talked about this quite a bit as it relates to emotional intelligence. But I want you to know that I'm just absolutely fascinated with how the brain works. And when you understand, you can help break down why some of your habits are what they are. And getting, I talked about pause practice in order to build a buffer between your reactionary limbic brain and giving your neocortex a chance to take over. This is sort of the same principles. So I really want to talk about what's actually happening in the brain. The limbic system, which I said the emotional center, that is your emotional center. And it takes over. And so the part of the brain that is wired for immediate relief, and it is not wired for long-term goals. So when a task triggers stress or shame or uncertainty, the limbic brain pushes you to towards avoidance behaviors, like you want to go scroll or clean or reorganize, like any of those things. Those are your avoidance behaviors. And that's why procrastination feels like I can't start, not I don't want to. And it's your limbic brain taking over. So there are a few sites. I will put the links in my show notes, but I think you might find these sites interesting. We all know that moment when the deadline is looming on us and the clock is ticking, but you find yourself like scrolling through videos or organizing your desk and remembering it's now the time you need to clean out the refrigerator. And the task is still there, and your brain seems to like push it away like a kid who doesn't want to take their medicine. You're not the only one out there. Procrastination is this really weird, maddening delay of action, and it's really hard sometimes to get over the hump. It's not just laziness. It's not just bad time management. It's way more complex. So I hope by the time this episode is over, you'll understand yourself a little better, and maybe you won't be so hard on yourself, because what's going on is really deeply wired in your biology. And at the heart of procrastination is a clash between two very old and powerful parts of the human brain, which is the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, which is where the neocortex resides. And these regions, they handle impulses very differently. The limbic system is one of the most ancient parts of the brain, and it's tied to, as we know, emotion, perceived threat, pleasure, reward. It also has embedded in it the structures of the amygdala and the nucleus accumbens, which help you react directly to danger, or when you're trying to get some short-term gratification. It's all of that impulse control. And when the limbic brain wants comfort or to feel safe or maybe get away from pain or fear, any of those things, both physical and emotional, that's what it handles. But the prefrontal cortex, which is right behind your forehead, it is responsible for the higher order thinking, and it governs planning and rational decision making. It is the impulse control. The limbic brain is the impulse. The prefrontal cortex is the control of that, and it's also the ability to delay gratification. And so the prefrontal cortex, it visualizes the long-term goals, and it creates steps to achieve it. And it can actually override these immediate emotions if it thinks the future rewards are there. So procrastination happens when the two systems are in conflict. The prefrontal cortex wants you to finish the report or start the workout routine. But the limbic brain is saying, it feels really hard and I feel stressed and I'm bored. I don't want to do this. And so in the heat of that debate, it's the emotionally charged limbic brain that typically wins. It doesn't help that the prefrontal cortex is actually kind of a weak functioning center of your brain. It gets tired easily. It is sensitive to stress. It's already fatigued, anxious, overwhelmed. It's the part that you really have to engage when you're thinking through things. And even though your brain is only 2% of your body weight, it takes up 20% of your energy and your calories and those kinds of things. And so it takes work to engage the prefrontal cortex. And it loses grip. And then the emotional system takes over. And so procrastination isn't the result of poor discipline. It's actually an overtaxed mind trying to cope with the emotional discomfort. So a lot of times when the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for the executive function, when the prefrontal cortex, when it gets weak, it's really harder to initiate tasks or even break them down. So insight psychology talks about the stress response. So procrastination is also really linked to stress. And if your prefrontal cortex is really stressed out, then avoiding a task temporarily reduces the stress on your system and it gives immediate relief. But then the deadline also increases anxiety. So there's this vicious cycle of task avoidance, which is temporary stress relief, then approaching deadline, which is heightened stress, and then the pressure to perform, which is the rush to complete the task. And chronic procrastination can rewire your brain, and that strengthens your avoidance pathways and weakens your ability to confront challenges head on. So the more you practice delay and avoidance and you're starting to wire your brain to do that all the time, and you're strengthening your limbic brain. So there's some personality things. I deal a lot with this through Clifton Strengths when I do these assessments and work with teams. I also talk about it when I'm doing a GENOS assessment with individuals, and understanding what happens in your brain and how you're showing up. And when you have more discipline and are able to get things done and you're strengthening performance pathways versus avoidance pathways. But those that have perfectionism tend to procrastinate more. So it would seem counterintuitive that perfectionists should be the very people that are the ones who get things done, they achieve their goals, but actually it's the fear of making a mistake or producing maybe some imperfect work that really activates the brain's a threat response, and so it starts triggering these avoidance behaviors. And when the emotions start to spike and you start feeling this perfectionism maybe, or you get really stressed out, that's the time when the limbic brain takes over, and there's an element of dopamine and the reward pathways that engages. So when your perfectionism wants immediate gratification, and it just causes more delay. So if you're afraid of not being perfect, if you're afraid of not getting it right, if you're afraid of making a mistake, you're also probably looking for security. The dopamine desire kicks in. And so then especially if it's boring or an ambiguous task, there's no instant gratification in that and no dopamine hit. So your brain starts to seek something that does, like the scrolling or cleaning out a refrigerator or getting something that feels accomplished. A lot of people who have high achiever from a Clifton Strengths perspective have lots of checklists because they're looking for that dopamine hit. And so being aware of that can also help kind of curtail some of that and go, you know what, I'm just looking for a dopamine hit. I really need to get to that task. If you have low levels of dopamine or serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter imbalance, that can exacerbate procrastination because those neurotransmitters are essential for motivation and mood regulation. And when they're imbalanced, it can sometimes even make a task feel overwhelming or unimportant. So here's the emotional avoidance. And this is, according to science, why we procrastinate. It's any task that triggers fear of failure, which is that perfectionism, and then shame or uncertainty, boredom. All of those kinds of tasks are more likely to be avoided. So when another science tidbit around procrastination is that a lot of times we have time misjudgment. Humans are really terrible at predicting how long a task will take and how in the future us will feel by getting this done or having to do it in the moment, and how the motivation will fluctuate as you work on things. So I know that a lot of times I procrastinate on something. I think this is going to take forever. I just don't even want to start because once I start, I'm stuck and I'm going to have to work on this for hours. And then I get up against the deadline and I have to get it done, and I think I'm going to have to spend 3, 4, 5 hours doing it, and I get in there and it took me 30 minutes. You know, I just recently had to send out my 1099 NECs for some people that were helping me last year, and I put it off and put it off and put it off and put it off. I finally had to get it out the door by January 31st, and I sat down and I did it in like 20 minutes. And I had just put it off for so long. It was dumb. I should have done it a long time ago. But I thought I was going to have to find this paperwork and find the address, and wasn't sure how to fill it out. And I just kept procrastinating because it's like, it's just going to take too long. This is where I procrastinate the most, is when I have a misguided idea of how long it's going to take. And then, of course, there's always the ego who gets in the way. But our brain tends to be very short-sighted. There was a scientist, let me get his name right here, Sahiti Chibolu from the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics, uses a precise mathematical framework to analyze different patterns and underlying causes. And her insights really help understand and help you create a personalized strategy to address some of the procrastination and help us get back to productivity. And she says that procrastination is a deliberate but ultimately detrimental delaying of task, because it not only hampers productivity, but it's linked to a lot of other mental health issues. So it's really worth it for us to ask why this much talked about phenomenon has such a grip on us and what it actually is. And she says that it's an umbrella term for different behaviors. If we want to understand it, we need to differentiate between the types. So one common pattern is that we defect on our own decisions. So for example, we set aside an evening for doing our tax returns, but then the time comes when we want to watch a movie instead. And so something else is going on, and we never committed to begin with. And so we're waiting for the right conditions. There are others, from like starting late to abandoning a task halfway through. It's why I have a hobby graveyard. I was all excited about it, and then all this other, I invest in all of the materials, and I get super excited that I'm going to create all of these amazing crafts, and I want to be the best at X craft that anyone has ever seen. And then I get it, and my learning curve is really high, and I give up on it. That's happened a lot. I used to tool leather, but I had such a great learning curve, and I enjoyed it, and I created some amazing things as a result of doing it. But I abandoned it, and I put it to the side. A lot, she calls it a short-sighted brain. She's convinced that mathematically precise understanding of the mechanism is the first step to tackling. She puts procrastination in a framework of a series of temporal decisions. So what happens when we say we're going to do taxes on Friday night, but then give in to watching a movie? Well, it's that our brain adds up all of the rewards and penalties that we expect to gain from the alternative behaviors, like watching a movie or doing the annoying paperwork. So it picks the course of action that promises to be the most pleasant overall. And then we end up outweighing the dismay of a hefty failure to file penalty over the movie. I mean, we choose the fun movie night over the penalty. And there's one small detail. Consequences in the distant future are weighted less by the brain in its calculation of positive and negative outcomes. So for the most part, this is pretty normal and actually pretty useful. The more distant future is necessarily pretty uncertain. And when we place excessive value on experiences in the present and not enough on those further ahead, we make decisions that are quickly, she says, maladaptive. So that's the theory. Real life procrastination, Chabulu delved into large data sets from the New York University, and it showed a log of students who were required to participate in a number of hours of experiments, and some rid themselves of the task right away. They just got it done. Others distributed over a course of evenly over several weeks, and there were still some that shirked it until it was almost too late. And she ran a bunch of simulations to reproduce their behavior, and she was asking what would best be able to account for different patterns of procrastination. And it's really easy for us to lay the blame on our brain's preference for immediately rewarding activities, but there's more involved. She found there were multiple possible explanations. Uncertainty is a major factor of procrastination, and it could be the failure to predict how, as I said, the time we will need. But uncertainty also means lacking the confidence in our abilities and doubting whether or not the task actually helps us get to our goals. So I've run a lot of marathons. I understand that you have to plot a course to be able to complete 26 miles in the time allowed. It is really easy, I know, for new runners who are like, this is not fun. I'm really hating doing this. And they're like, I can run the long miles later. And so they'll maybe not go for that 12-mile run when they should. Maybe they will put off running. I know when I was having health problems, I also, because the reward was not there in my mind. It was so far off. And I'm someone who's run 100-milers. So there's a lot going on with the reward mechanism going on inside of our brain, but there's also stress and overwhelm. And so sometimes if we have chronic stress like I was with my health problems, it really reduces your ability to control your executive function, and that makes even getting started on the task even harder. So procrastination, as you know, isn't new. Humans have been doing it since ancient Greece and Rome, and it's tied to three things, basically: conserving energy, avoiding perceived threats, and then seeking immediate rewards. There's a really great article from Psychological Science, talks about the Greek poet Hesiod, am I saying that right? Hesiod, who wrote around 800 BC, and he says not to, quote, put your work off till tomorrow and the day after. The Roman consul Cicero called procrastination hateful in the conduct of affairs, and he was looking at Marcus Antonius. And those are just some examples of recorded history. So what's become quite clear since the days of Cicero is that procrastination isn't just hateful, it can be downright harmful, in that you have higher levels of stress and lower well-being when you do it. Putting things off, the undesired delay is really associated with, like a lot of people not having their retirement savings built up, missing medical visits. It would be like all people who delay and procrastinate doing their taxes. I got to get all my tax paperwork together for 2025. And I've already lost all of January because I was just putting it off and prioritizing other things. But people have cost themselves hundreds of dollars by rushing to prepare income taxes too close to the April 15th deadline. So the big picture is procrastination. Let's just review. It's not laziness. It's not a moral failing, and it's not a character flaw. It's a neuro-emotional response where the brain prioritizes short-term emotional relief over long-term goals. So, what does this mean for real life? If you're understanding the science of the brain, the neuroscience about how our limbic brain is the stronger portion of the brain because we always rely on our emotions to make those decisions unless we give our neocortex time to step in, which is part of the prefrontal cortex. So I'm hoping that you understanding this neuroscience will help reduce some of the shame, and that you can start building some systems that bypass emotional bottlenecks. And then you can use those strategies that support executive function, and then we can create environments where your brain doesn't default to avoidance. So neurodivergent procrastination is unique. Those of us that are on the spectrum or neurodivergent, ADHD, we experience procrastination differently because of our unique executive function profiles and our sensory emotional processing. So challenges such as difficulty with task initiation, a heightened sensitivity to overwhelm, and then fluctuating motivation are all part of this equation. And so procrastination here is less about laziness and more about the brain's struggle to regulate attention, energy, and emotional responses in environments that may not be neurodivergent friendly. So a lot of times we're already very distracted, we're already overwhelmed, we experience a whole other set of stressors that neurotypical people don't, because we're just trying to fit in, and we have the stress of trying to fit in, and then we're completely exhausted, and we're just looking for a dopamine hit to get us back to normal and feeling calm again. So there are some strategies that do honor neurodivergent needs. Like one of the things that I do is I break down tasks into ultra small steps. Not just like I have this big goal and here are the 10 steps that need to happen. I break those 10 steps into additional 10 steps so that they're very small nibbles to get to the ultimate goal. And I coach a lot of people on how to break things down even finer. And also using hyper-focus periods when I can get into flow. I can get into flow most easily first thing in the morning. But that means delaying taking my shower until after I'm out of flow. And so I'm having to balance how I feel about those things. Also, creating sensory-friendly workspaces can be transformative. I've talked a lot about how to create neurodivergent-friendly workspaces, and it isn't just about helping neurodivergent people focus. It's also about helping them not overload their brains, not overstressing their brains, so they are less likely to procrastinate and put things off when they know it may be a bigger load on their brains overall, if you can reduce some of that external stress so that they can focus on the things that they're trying to accomplish. So, executive function-based strategies would include things like chunking tasks, which I've talked about, breaking large tasks into manageable parts, time blocking, which specific periods for focused work, externalizing the reminders. This is such a big thing for me. I do use a lot of alarms and apps, visual cues. If I know I'm going to be in a meeting and it's 15 minutes out, I will set an alarm for me 13 minutes out so that I don't sit and watch the clock nonstop, because I'll work on something and then I'll check the clock, work on something and check the clock. Afraid I will miss the meeting, because once I get in flow, I'm almost always 5 or 10 minutes late to a meeting because I let time get away from me and I was involved in what I was working on. So I have tons of alarms on my phone, and I use Alexa. I have Alexas all over the house, and I ask them to send me reminders. There are some good prioritization frameworks out there. The Eisenhower matrix, I've talked about that in a previous podcast. I can put a link in my show notes to some of those frameworks that I talk about in some of those episodes. And then pre-commitment. This is a really big one. Making decisions in advance to reduce chronic fatigue. So these strategies will help with the prefrontal cortex, give it some more strength when it's going against your limbic brain. And then your impulse, your natural impulse coming out of your amygdala. There are a lot of philosophies around controlling this limbic brain. There's a lot of meditation and mindfulness practices. They call it the monkey mind. Some people call it the elephant brain. Some people call it the crocodile brain. There are those who just call it your reptile brain. There are a lot of names for it, but it is really hard to control that impulse when it's so tied to your emotions, and it's the flight, fight, or freeze aspect of your brain. It's just already wired. And I did an episode, and I think it was in December, where I'm talking about the proprioception, where you start to feel your feelings in your body first and start to recognize. That's where the pause practice comes in, and getting back in touch with your body and recognizing and feeling some of those things. What am I doing, and how can I change my perception? So designing the habits that align with your natural brain rhythms and reward systems can really reduce procrastination. And the key principles are starting small, being consistent with a regular repetition, that always strengthens neural pathways. This is really important. Reward to engaging dopamine pathways. So if you start rewarding your commitment to achieving your goals and giving yourself those rewards, I do this a lot with my clients. How can you reward yourself for going to bed on time the next morning? So if you go to bed, you get the right amount of sleep. Maybe the thing that you really love is a special breakfast treat. So when you go to bed on time, you can get up on time, and then you can have that breakfast treat. It's sometimes hard, though, when it's a delayed gratification. So if you're really struggling with your going to bed early at night, maybe if you go to bed by 10 o'clock, you have the candy bar that you wanted until you reward yourself. Maybe it's, if I turn off everything, then I get to have this warm fuzzy blanket that I sleep with. So figure out what those immediate rewards can be if you find that the delayed reward in the morning isn't enough. Also, you have to shape your environment. You really need to modify your surroundings to reduce friction and distractions. It's really important. The biggest executive function hurdle that I have with a lot of my neurodivergent clients is getting to bed. If you are engaging in online gaming and you're starting late, you're going to introduce yourself into continuing to play. You'll lose track of time. You'll never get to bed on time. you need to figure out how to reward yourself by shutting off the games at a certain time at night and having a nighttime ritual that maybe includes a cup of tea or a warm milk or whatever that reward is for you. But you have to set up your environment that will help you go to bed on time, get up on time. Maybe if you have trouble getting your shower in the morning, what's something that would feel like a reward that you could get, that you would look forward to when you got into the shower? Is it a great smelling soap? Or maybe it's a video that you play on your phone while you're getting ready. Another thing that really helps too is habit stacking. So if you connect habits, like I always take my pills at the same time at night, my vitamins and such. If you habit stack, if you're trying to learn a new habit, if maybe at the time that you take your any of your vitamins at night, maybe that's when you start to wind down for the evening. Like maybe you always eat lunch. I had a client one time who would always forget to take her medicine every day. It was for ADHD. And I said, well, when is the best time for you to be taking this? Well, and she said it was like not at first thing in the morning because she's struggling to get up in the morning. I asked her, well, do you eat lunch at the same time every day? And she said, yes. So I suggested that she always pack her lunch, because she did pack her lunch frequently, and put her medicine in her lunch bag. So that every time she ate her lunch, she would take her medicine and then she could get regulated with her ADHD. So that can sometimes help transform these daunting tasks into automatic behaviors. Now, since procrastination is deeply tied to emotional avoidance, there are some tools that can help regulate your emotions. And those tools would be things like mindfulness and grounding. They can help you stay present, help you reduce anxiety, help you get back in touch with your body and start paying attention to the proprioception. And then there's some cognitive reframing, like changing negative self-talk to supporting narratives instead. CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, if you can find a therapist that can talk with you about that. You can also Google some of those techniques and find out more about them. Also stress management, like breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation. And then there's emotional labeling, like learning how to name your feelings to reduce their intensity. If you're feeling really tight and tense and bound and it's really stressful, you can say, I'm gonna relax my shoulder, and I'm gonna relax my arm, and I'm gonna relax my hand. And then you can say, I am feeling afraid, I'm feeling pressure, I'm feeling anger, whatever those feelings are that are making you ball up. If you notice those things, will be really helpful. And I know there are some out there who have trouble naming their emotions, but you can name the feeling that you're feeling in your body. Also some self-compassion practices, talking about reducing your shame and fostering kindness towards yourself. Just ask yourself, how would I talk to a friend of mine if they were going through the same thing? Would I tell them all the things that I'm telling myself right now? Talk to yourself as if you were a good friend of yours. So, I hope that some of this is helpful to you in understanding what procrastination is all about. That Chibulu talks about how you can understand that this is just a series of temporal decisions, and then figuring out why you took a wrong turn can inform how you intervene in the future. If you think that maybe your brain is a bit too biased towards instant gratification, you can give yourself some short-term rewards for taking the right path, and that will sort of help you build the neural pathways, as well as giving you the dopamine hit that you're desiring. Anyone who tends to over or underestimate the time needed could set some time-bound goals, and maybe that would help you, and say, I'm only going to work on this for 20 minutes, so it doesn't seem quite so overwhelming. And then if you find yourself like getting halfway through a chore, let's say you decide you're going to clean the refrigerator, and you get everything out, and then all of a sudden it feels very overwhelming, and you just want to abandon it and walk away, and then the food goes bad, maybe you do it at a time where you won't be distracted. For me, I have to keep my 12-year-old brain, as I call it, entertained. So I will put on a show I've watched dozens of times, like it might be watching Friends or watching MASH, and just letting the episodes go one right after another, and just kind of having that playing in the background helps keep my 12-year-old brain engaged while my prefrontal cortex is involved in doing the things that I need to get done. My 12-year-old brain all the time wants to be entertained. And if I can find peace between my limbic brain and my prefrontal cortex, then I can get more things done. So sometimes on my very long runs, I will listen to a book that I really love. I completed the entire Harry Potter series of books on Audible, and I just listened to them. I actually listened to one entire book when I was running Moab 240. And so I found that really helpful because my 12-year-old brain is the brain that says, I don't want to do this. This is too hard. This hurts. If I keep it entertained and engaged in something else, my neocortex, my prefrontal cortex, can continue with the goal completion and thinking things through and doing the executive function. It's the same thing when I get ready. I reward myself with a video of one of my very favorite YouTubers, the Unexpected Gypsy, Wendy Robbins, I think is her last name. I really love listening to her. I use her as my reward for getting through my getting ready process. I have some other ideas coming up that I think you all might find very interesting down the road, and how I want to start creating some shorts around this executive function. So yeah, I hope you found this helpful. I hope maybe it takes some shame out for you. Know that when you're wanting to procrastinate, maybe you deep dive and study what is the battle going on between your limbic brain and your prefrontal cortex. Get to know the two parts of your brain and understand, I just want this reward. How can you reward your limbic brain while also helping your prefrontal cortex achieve the task that you're trying to achieve? So if you found this interesting, please share it with your friends. Please subscribe. I really appreciate everyone who's out there. I'm slowly gaining larger numbers of subscribers, and I really appreciate all of you listening. Love yourselves. Know that there is nothing wrong with you. Everybody does this. I am an executive coach and a life coach, so if you decide that you want some help with your own limbic brain and prefrontal cortex brain conflict, please reach out. I'm happy to assist and provide you some coaching along those lines. It's been great fun studying this. I'm always fascinated with how the neuroscience works in our daily lives, and I just keep diving deeper and deeper. So hang out with me and let's find out more about how our brains work, and good luck with controlling your limbic brain and sort of getting out there and getting your goals accomplished. So much love to all of you from inside the pickle jar, and I'll talk to you next time.